Welcome to Blinkers Off with your hosts, Jared Welch and Aaron Halterman.
What is up? What is up? I'm Jared Welch. He's Aaron Halterman. It is Thursday, November 14th, and this is Blinkers Off. What's up, man?
What's up, guys? Good to be back. Yeah, man. It was nice to be gone. Brian did a good job last week, I thought, but good to be back on the show. And oddly enough, the Kentucky Derby is now the subject as we're 6 months away, but the season begins here in a couple of weeks, in my opinion.
Yeah, I looked last. I was like, what did we do last year? Because this is always like a tricky week, you know. And it's like I honestly don't think we did one last year. Wow. I looked at unless we did one and I didn't have it marked down because there was literally nothing on like this area of the date. So I was like, well, I guess we'll do it this year. But no, I mean, You're right. Like it was funny, good timing because this week I literally updated the whole Kentucky Derby page on our site, switched over from Breeders' Cup to Kentucky Derby on the menu. So when you said let's do Derby, it's like, all right. Sounds fitting, but yeah, I mean, it's like it's way too early, but at the same time, you release this week your top 5, so it is the right time to at least start talking about it.
I wasn't going to do it or suggest it, but like I said, I started the weekly videos for the Kentucky Derby news update this week, right? It got more views than the Breeders' Cup Juvenile preview and the Breeders' Cup Distaff preview, and a lot of the Breeders' Cup content that didn't include the Classic. That video got more views than that. So it's like, well, that's pretty simple what we're going to do today because people want to talk about it already. And you know, I think it's almost got like 2,000 views in 3 days, and it's 6 months away. Yeah. And basically, all I did was list 5 horses because there's not any real news to talk about yet. So. Top 5 horses for a race 6 months away got 2,000 views. Crazy.
Well, and like as you very clearly stated in the video, it's like I mean, we'll be lucky if one of these on this list, actually makes it to the race. And it's not like it's bad. It's a bad list. It just means it's November of the year before. So, but everything is off the table because we're back to Bob Baffert season, and that makes the whole thing. Very interesting as we move forward for sure. It's gonna. I mean, obviously we're used to it, but it's been a minute, and so we're gonna have to refocus a little bit on those Bob Baffert horses.
Yeah, no, and that's the number one thing that is obvious. As soon as you start to rank and start to look, it's like, okay, Baffert's 1-2 on the rankings, So, and you don't have to worry about them going to Yaktine or anything like that. You've got Baffert back, and you got the regular situation back, and so that's great. And look, I think this year, we went into that Breeders' Cup Juvenile thinking, boy, there's a lot of really good horses, and I know the race didn't really shape up like we thought, but I still don't think you exit that and go, well, this crop isn't very strong right now. I think there's a lot of potential in it. And I think right now like you said, it's just kind of here's my initial 5 as we're 6 months out and this will all change. But when you start to build like, okay, who would a top 20 be today? There's some pretty nice horses that you can talk about, and we'll talk about some of them in the show. But I guess long story short, I was talking to Stillman today. He's like, you know what? We got a lot of older horses coming back that are really good. And this 2-year-old crop that's going to be turning 3, they look decent. We could be in for a pretty good 2025. The outlook of 2025 isn't too bad.
No, I mean, we talked a little bit, Ryan and I did last week when we were kind of going over the Breeders' Cup and the Juvenile, and it's like you have a list. And the thing is, like with the Bob Baffert horses in particular, the 2 that, the main 2 there that ran in the Juvenile, it's like those 2 may not even be close to the top 2 from Baffert's standpoint when we get to May. Right. And so like and I do think like Citizen Bull is certainly a horse that is interesting. But like East Avenue is a horse like that, and even Chancer less than East Avenue, but both of those horses probably deserve another shot. I think East Avenue more than anyone, obviously with the break, killed him. Chancer I'm a little less high on after that performance because I didn't think he had any excuses. But and then on top of that, I think that, as and we're very well familiar with this time of the year. I mean, gosh, there's so many horses that probably have, whether they've not started or definitely not ran the stakes, that aren't even close to being on a radar right now.
Right. Yeah, and that's just it. I mean, there's horses that haven't even started yet that you're just, will come up, right? And that'll be between now and February, really. I mean, with how things are now, that having to have race as a 2-year-old doesn't mean quite as much. When Justify did it, it was like, well, he might be a freak. Then Mage did it, and then for me, toss it out the window. He's certainly not a freak, right? So, yeah, I mean, all the way up and seriously until February, you could see the Derby winner debut, and so we've got a lot to look forward to. Not only stakes races that are Kentucky Derby prep races to round out 2024, but the maiden special weights get very important. Places like Churchill, and then Gulfstream, Oaklawn, places like that, Santa Anita. You're going to see these horses debut, even the last part of Del Mar here, and they're going to be factors in it. There's no doubt.
All right, guys, let's just get right into it. This is going to be a little bit of a kind of a fluid show where we're just kind of go through, some of the prep races coming up. Maybe believe it or not, the Kentucky Derby official site doesn't even have their list updated as far as point standings. But we'll take a look at the list and kind of see what's on, who is on the leaderboard, at least prior to the juvenile. Apparently, we just took the break. Everyone took a break after the Breeders' Cup. But we'll talk about a little bit about that. We'll see some of the trainers maybe that have some big time prospects for 2025, horses that you may not know about, or at least trainers that might have some talent. We'll answer a bunch of questions for you guys as it looks towards the Kentucky Derby 2025. 151 is the Kentucky Derby this year. Let's go. I like the logo they did this year. You can see it there on the top right. It's kind of cool with the one with the spires being ones. That's kind of neat.
Yep. It's good. It's a race that's been difficult the last few years, right? It's been a weird one. You look back at last year. Okay, Mystic Dan wins the race. Look at the horses he beat now. Like maybe you looked at it that day and you're like, well, okay, I get it. These horses aren't that good. Look at what Mystic Dan did after, and then look what all these other horses behind him have done after.
Mm-hmm.
He beat the Classic winner. He beat the Travers winner. He beat the Jim Dandy winner. He beat the Classic third place finisher and second place finisher. I mean, it's crazy to think that Mystic Dan was able to do it.
The fact that he beat, the Classic winner, he beat the Classic 1-2 finishers. I mean, 1, 2, 3. Did Forever Young finish third or fourth?
Yeah, third.
Yeah, top three. Who also in turn beat the horse that is going to be horse of the year, his stablemate, right? Because it's like it just all those things, and then it's like this horse is just vanished,
Yep.
So
yeah.
And that just goes to show you, like where the hell is he at, And like you mentioned in your videos, like the Rich Strikes and the Mystic Dans, and it's like just so much that. And what's funny is you look back and some of these horses wouldn't even been in the Derby had Baffert been able to run, obviously, right, because he would have had horses that would have bumped these horses out. And so it's it definitely was the perfect situations for these things to happen. But at the same regard, that's the Derby. And I think more than anything over the years, over the last handful of years, and maybe it is a Bob Baffert situation a little bit as well. But it just seems like I've grown to where it's like the Derby is you just throw everything out the window. There's no logic to the Derby. Well, more than ever, I feel like.
The 3 years without Derby, the 3 years without Baffert has been Rich Strike, Mage, and Mystic Dan, none of which have come back to win a race.
We need Bob Baffert in our lives.
I guess that's what it's saying, yeah.
Big time. He can right the ship. Whatever you think about him, it's like at least he's got quality horses. Do you think if I put it? I was thinking about this earlier. I think the number would be 3, 3.5. Do you think Bob Baffert will have 3.5 is in the Derby field?
I would go under. I don't want to bring that a down subject, but as many as have been getting hurt and stuff under him, I don't know that he will have 4 healthy horses by then. I think he'll have 1 or 2. I don't know if I'll go with 4.
I mean, okay, what if I said 4.5, Bob Baffert and Pletcher combined?
Probably over, because Pletcher seems to get 3 or 4 in there that probably shouldn't be. So.
Yeah. I'd say, is it possible that Bob Baffert and Pletcher have like half the field? I think it's possible.
You say, yeah, probably, but like, give me a Pletcher that you even think can be in the Derby as of right now. I know, to be fair, that will all change, but
I got none. I mean, really, but like there's always like 3 or 4 that pop up in like February and March.
Absolutely.
That maybe shouldn't be, like you said, like he's perfect with them, because it's like, golly, I don't think these horses are very good, but he finds a way to get them in, and then of course they don't win. But all right,
well, it's like all of a sudden you look up and it's April, and he got this one in because it went to Tampa and beat a terrible field, and then this one went up to Turfway and hit the board, so he got in, and then this one, finished second by a nose in the woods, so he got in. And you look at it, it's like, well, hell, none of these have a chance, but he got him there.
That's a really good. And Pletcher, Baffert, Cox, 10.5. Oh,
Cox,
man.
He seems like he has a bunch right now.
Cox has kind of turned into the new Pletcher in terms of getting horses there.
Yeah. I would go under, but I wouldn't be surprised if it went over. If I had to bet, I'd go under, though.
That's insane. I mean, think about it, over half the field, or around half the field of those 3 guys, which, 3 best. I mean, I don't know if I'd say best trainers, but definitely the 3 top trainers as it comes to getting horses to the Derby, right now. So, all right. Kentucky Derby 151. That's right. Don't adjust your clocks. We are talking about Kentucky Derby 151 that it will run May 3rd, 2025. We're talking about it here November 14th. But, with the juvenile or the Kentucky Jockey Club happening at the end of this month, and then really from there you get the rims in, and then you just go straight into it. And then of course, in a month after that, you get into 2025, and you've got 3, the 2-year-olds turning 3, and then next thing you know, it's May. So here we are talking Kentucky Derby. The juvenile just happened. Like I said, the Jockey Club will happen next. Go into the rims in. Do any of these 2024 prep races after the juvenile do much for you as far as like, the Rimson has sort of been decently productive, I would say. You look at some of the horses, Sierra Leone, obviously a big horse in there as well. That's, I think, didn't he run in that last year?
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got, it's been a race that's somewhat productive, but it's not necessarily maybe the most like critical races either.
Yeah, look, I think you said it perfectly. I do think the Rimson's made a very big comeback over the last few years as far as Derby runners and doing well, and also Belmont runners have done very well out of the Rimson. So yes, the Rimson is a race I'm very excited about. I always do get excited about the Kentucky Jockey Club, even though I as far as like for the Derby, no, not so much. But I do love that as just a race of its own. Same with the Springboard Mile. I love the Springboard Mile, but I know that that's not going to be a Derby prep per se. But yeah, the Rimson is the one. I really believe the Rimson is a race that has really made a lot of impact, not only on the Derby in the last couple of years, but on the other Triple Crown races. So the Rimson for me, I'm very excited about.
Yeah, and then obviously this year you look towards the Futurity, and it's always Bob Baffert race, even whenever he was suspended from the Derby. But this year obviously means more because you're going to have those points, and again, they're 10 points on the line, so it doesn't make or break a horse, but it definitely starts to show you kind of the horses. And over the years, Bob Baffert has tended to have some of his best prospects run in the Los Al Futurity. So this year, I definitely feel like more than the last couple of years, this is going to be an important race.
Yeah, that's true. I think the California situation gets a lot. I don't know that it will be better because those fields still seem to be pretty short, I would imagine. But at least now you have a horse that with a trainer that it can win the race and get the points, and you don't have to talk about it afterwards. But oh, he won, but where's he going to go? What barns is he going to go to? So I think the California circuit will be more entertaining this year. I'm not one to sit here and say they're going to get 10 horses in these races, but I do think they'll have more than 4 or 5. And I think we'll see a little bit stronger of a situation there at Santa Anita. I sure hope so, because whether you love Southern California racing or not, or Bob Baffert or not, Santa Anita is an historic track in this industry and in the game. And for it to just kind of be a joke is not right. That you want that to be strong. You really want Santa Anita to be strong. You want Gulfstream and all that to be strong. Those are kind of your 2 big ones leading up to it. And then in April, you really want Oaklawn and Keeneland to kind of fill in, and Louisiana. So, but I really hope Santa Anita has a better meet this year as far as the 3-year-olds, because last year was not fun to watch.
It's funny too. We hadn't like the West Coast just overall was so bad these last couple of years, like as far as Derby production. And obviously I don't think there's any kind of, I think there's a pretty good direct correlation as to why, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I was looking at what you're talking there. Last year you had Dornoch and Sierra Leone in the Rimson.
Yeah. Just
the Belmont winner and the Classic winner in that race that finished 1-2. Not too bad. And the Haskell winner, but not too bad at all. Sierra Leone damn near won the Kentucky Derby as well. Then you go the year prior was awful. WH&L was like the winner of that. But the year before that, you had Mo Donegal and Zandon, who obviously were who they were, but still was a productive race. And so I definitely feel like, especially when it relates to who they're trained by, right? Whether it be Pletcher, whether it be Brown, or whether, whoever it is, like you're starting to see some of these horses. I mean, Sierra Leone is a horse like Chad Brown is like seemingly getting some pretty good ones to run in the Rimson, which would mean you want to pay attention to those horses in particular as they move forward.
Yeah, I mean, it is quite crazy that a horse like Sierra Leone got beat in the Rimson by Dornoch, and then goes on to be the Breeders' Cup Classic winner, but isn't the Kentucky Derby, Preakness, or Belmont, or Travers, or Haskell winner. He didn't get any of those big ones after the Bluegrass, and then he wins a Classic. As Sierra Leone is a wild example, but an accurate example of how racing luck really has to be on your side if you're a closer, because there's a lot of races in there where you go, how in the world does a horse that wins the Breeders' Cup Classic can't win the Jim Dandy, right? Yeah. Or can't be, looking back on it, no offense to Dornoch, who had a nice little stretch where he was really good, but he lost to Dornoch and Mindframe in the Belmont. Like, you look back at that now after what Sierra Leone did in the Classic, and you go, how does he, first of all, how's he not 1-5? And how does he lose? Well, it's racing luck that happens with closers.
Yeah, for sure. When I look at the Futurity, Bob Baffert has won the Futurity 8 of the last 10 years, which is just insane. He rattled off like 7 in a row there between 2014 and 2020. And it's kind of been a case of good ones and you're like, wow, that horse is so shitty that just won that race. So you kind of have to take it with both ways. Dortmund, obviously, Mastery got hurt, but McKenzie was great and probable. 1,000 Words, I mean, was he was, but he got into the Derby. But then you have horses like Spielberg, who was a disappointment. Winstock, who won it last year, disappointment. So you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. But Practical Move and Slow Down Andy were the 2 years that that wasn't Bob Baffert. And I mean, obviously not necessarily didn't win the Derby, but we're good horses. And so I do think it's such a productive race. And at the even if it's not Bob Baffert, I think you pay attention even more if it were to win, if they were to win that race. Yeah,
just a horrific race last year that hopefully is better this year. That is kind of the one out in Southern California that you worry about, because it is at Los Al, and even on years where we're kind of get quote unquote normal conditions, it gets awkward in that race. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, last year, do you remember the favorite last year in the Los Al Futurity?
Well, I do because I looked it up, and that horse never ran again, which was on my fantasy team, which was awesome. So Coach Prime, super. Wonder where he's at.
That's a great question. That's a name that I thankfully, I have thought about him in college football, but not on the racetrack. I have no idea what happened to that horse. Who knows at this time? He did start working again, but he hasn't worked in about 2 weeks. It looks like.
Yeah, and just was like a huge, Zidane Racing, $1.7 million horse, so obviously a huge disappointment. When I drafted him, it was right after that. I thought, he's the favorite of the race. He had won easily the race prior. Like, he's got to be rebounding from there. and literally would kind of come every once in a while, would come back and work out, and then you would see him. And so clearly the horse has some sort of major issues happening.
Yeah. Well, you're right. Like, he would work out 100 times and then he would never race. He would disappear, work out 100 times, race. I mean, or not race, disappear. I don't know. He was weird.
Well, Bob Baffert had 3 of the 5 last year, and they weren't very good. So,
no.
So again, it doesn't always mean that they are legit. Stronghold was second in that race. I think Diamato / O'Neill are horse. When they've got horses, Yaktine. So we'll see. Yakteen's been known to have some good ones in this race as well. So, I mean, again, it doesn't necessarily mean that, this Bob Baffert just won. This is like who you want. But sometimes when I don't know who he's pointing at this race at all. I don't know if Gaming's going to go. I don't know, if Citizen is one of those horses, or if it's going to be a kind of a quote unquote new shooter. But I definitely think that these horses, it's going to be, you're going to have to put all your Bob Baffert thoughts aside and get back to, okay, if he's got a horse in the race, he's going to find a way. I mean, this guy's going to be bringing in all kinds of horses he can in all these races, especially out west.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then, as we get into 2025, Oaklawn is going to be the big target for him as well. He brings horses into Oaklawn. That thing gets started with the Smarty Jones. They've got the 4 preps there: Smarty Jones, Southwest, Rebel, and Arkansas Derby. Baffert, usually Rebel, Arkansas Derby for sure, has a big time presence.
Out of these that you see on the list there, the January races, the Jerome, the Smarty, the LeCompte, and the Southwest, which of those do you get the most excited for when it's it's like, hey, the New Year's here, boom, these are the horses, these are we're officially in, hey, this horse won, because now the LeCompte and the Southwest are 20-point races. Are those when they get to 20? Is that when you start to get these races actually mean something?
Yeah, I always used to say the Kentucky Derby Trail unofficially starts for me when they run the Southwest. It just feels like that, as an Oaklawn person, that's something I would always say. Now, the Southwest runs a little bit later, so it kind of, honestly, the comp is when it really starts for me, because that fairground circuit has gotten a lot stronger over the last 3, 4, 5 years. So I think the LeCompte for me is kind of when you really get into that feeling, and then the Southwest as well. So those two certainly kind of get it started. Also, another way that I have looked at it since the Pegasus has arrived. So for me, it's kind of Breeders' Cup season ends, and then we've got the rest of the year. That's you get into Derby season. And then when January starts, it's Pegasus season in a way. And then when the Pegasus ends, it's full-fledged Derby season again. So once that Pegasus ends, it really kicks it off as well. And that's right around the Southwest. I think the Southwest runs the Friday usually before the Pegasus on Saturday. Totally
different gear here, but since you weren't on last week, we talked a little bit about it. Who do you think is going to run in the Pegasus?
Great question.
I by the way, I've not looked at any problem or possibles or anything I have no idea.
I love the Pegasus probably more than any other racing person there is. Except for maybe you. We love the Pegasus. And I would think it's going to be interesting. So the Pegasus, the Saudi Cup, and the Dubai World Cup, those are the three big ones. The Saudi Cup did not exist when they started the Pegasus, and it's put that race in a little weird spot, right? But wouldn't a horse like Fierceness be perfect for the Pegasus? I would think he would be in it. Sierra Leone's coming back. Maybe he goes in it as well. I mean, that's a great question. I think Fierceness is the one that would be the favorite at this moment.
With Fierceness, I just wonder if they're gonna, like, because of the campaign he had this year and the horse they obviously have been very clear, like we want to space out his races, and it almost makes me wonder if they might not run him until like, is Dubai, like, is that the race they go to?
Could be.
Maybe waiting, like giving him a pretty big break. I don't know. I just pulled up the list on Horse Racing Nation because that's really the only place to look as far as. And there's no probables. Obviously, it's too early, but I'll just give you the list that that's been acquired on there. White Abaria, Mystic Dan, Locked, Miramati. That's hilarious. Battle of Normandy, Skippy Longstocking, Full Serrano, Mindframe, and Integration. That's who's on the list.
Integration.
Yeah, there you go.
He'll be in the turf, maybe.
It's funny. There's two of them that have statuses of goals. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Well, I think that they're just kind of, who knows? That wouldn't be the greatest field if that's what it is. But
there certainly will be better ones. Yeah,
sure. I think so. And there's horses that we're not even like thinking about that could be running as well. I don't know. That's going to be fun to kind of see. I always like how it's just, I love that it's in January and it gives a big day in January to get excited about. That's always my favorite thing about it.
Looking at going back to the Derby stuff, and obviously, by the way, you do have, it is a race or a day, I should say, that where there is at least a couple, over the years, like a main special weight or two that just, or an allowance or whatever that really flashes that a horse that all of a sudden becomes a Derby prospect, maybe sometimes better than others, right? But at least have the hype. Going back to the Derby stuff here, the Lecomte has been a race. It's an interesting race. Last year was awful, right? If you everybody, there's another name for you guys that you may have tried to disregard, like Coach Prime, Nash. Right, horse came into the Lecomte last year as a heavy favorite. Not really heavy. Track Phantom will end up winning. Was second choice. And then Track Phantom kind of fizzled out as well, but Nash, man, was really bad, and had a ton of hype going into that race. And so it has been over the years, like, to me, a race that, like, you look at 2 years ago, Two Phils got second in the race. Instant Coffee won that race as a favorite, but Two Phils obviously damn near won the Kentucky Derby. And so it's just, to me, it's been a race, not always, but Call Me Midnight Bourbon was a good one, but I feel like it's always one of those races that has a couple that didn't win. Epicenter was a horse that didn't win this race a couple of years ago, obviously. Cyberknife, another good one. So it's always a race to me that has horses, but doesn't necessarily always produce the horse, like, as far as a winner goes.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I definitely feel like the Risen Star and the Louisiana Derby are kind of where you see the strength of the Louisiana circuit. This one's just kind of the starter version of it, so to speak. And especially in a weird way, the Risen Star has been better than the Louisiana Derby the last couple of years. So that's strange as well. But anyway, it's still, you never know. You never know when an Epicenter is going to come on and just and look great down in Louisiana. And like I said, he didn't even win this one, so it can be a strange one. As with the whole circuit, the Louisiana circuit can be weird at times. I feel like you get the favorite or you get a total bomb.
You look at the Southwest. It's funny. We'll pivot to the Southwest now because you kind of mentioned that as well. Like, it's a funny race because there for a long time, obviously we're big Oaklawn guys, and for the longest time, it was really hard to take the Southwest too seriously. Like it felt like an important race, but at the same time, you're like, like, I don't know, who's going to come out of that and whatever. But now it's like, look at the last 4 years: Essential Quality, Newgrange, Arabian Night, which obviously those two, couldn't even get to the Derby anyways. But we're especially Arabian Night, huge prospect at that time for Bob Baffert, and then Mystic Dan, right? Mystic Dan won the race last year, and went on to win the Kentucky Derby. Essential Quality, damn near could have, right? So it's definitely been a race that over the last several years that I feel like has become more and more like a more of a legit type of race.
Yeah, I think raising the purse has been a big thing. Where it's located in the calendar is a big thing as well. It's kind of right there where if you're a horse that's getting ready to crank it up, that's a good spot for your first start, like Essential Quality. Of course, Essential Quality just ran once there at Oaklawn and went on to Keeneland for the Bluegrass, but it was all about timing, and that was a nice time spot for him to do the next step, right? So the thing about Oaklawn that's tough, so their best trainers as far as Derby prospects usually are Steve Asmussen and Brad Cox. But the problem is you never know where they're going to run their horses because they split them between there and the fairgrounds. And so then you're at a situation where, like, okay, Asmussen's got a couple, Cox has 3 or 4, but I have no idea if they're going to go to Oaklawn. So that's factor number 1. And factor number 2 is Bob Baffert kind of does the same thing just with his 3-year-olds between Oaklawn and Santa Anita. So it's always hard to know how good the races are going to be at Oaklawn because you don't have a lot of guys that run just at Oaklawn.
Yeah.
And this is where I'm taking my 3-year-old right here at Oaklawn, no other place.
That's a good point. And it becomes, it's really hard, right, for us. I mean, everybody, but for us to really follow Oaklawn because it's like, it's a weird track. It's hard to explain. Like to people like, we have everybody from Bob Baffert to Pletcher to McPeak, and everyone in between, right? They run there, but they're like, a lot of them don't call it home, and the ones that do aren't necessarily the ones that you can depend on producing a Kentucky Derby type horse, right?
Yep.
And so it's really hard, like you said, it's really hard to look. It's like, well, Pletcher might send one, and he might have at Gulfstream, he might have one in the Bluegrass and Keeneland. Bob Baffert, he'll ship typically his best one of his best ones, but you never know which one that might be.
Yep.
And you have like these, whether it be Gulfstream and Brad Cox with Fairgrounds. So it is, you don't really know until you know.
Yeah, it's like, for lack of a better term, it's almost like a melting pot of thing. You just get a little bit of everything thrown in there. And Shadi's right. That's a big part of it. The weather is not great early in the meet. You start to see more horses and horsemen show up in March and April because it's so much nicer. So you could get some bad weather. You will get some bad weather those early months. And yeah, I mean, when you think of Oaklawn locals, you do think of Asmussen and Cox, but again, they're split. And so who's just at Oaklawn? Like a Ron Moquette, Donnie Kay, Von Hemel, guys that are good trainers, but they're not Derby trainers per se. They've had horses in the Derby, but they're not year in and year out they're trying, but they're not getting them there,
Mm-hmm. So let's take a look a little bit we'll go to February here, and the Holy Bull is a race that has, like it's if everybody remembers last year, right? The horse that did basically won all summer, Fierceness, and was Kentucky Derby favorite. Was, I believe, the favorite as they went to the gate of the Breeders' Cup Classic. Obviously ran second. Got smoked by Hades in this race. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Hades and Domestic Product both beat Fierceness. This was his comeback race after his unbelievable, impressive performance at the Breeders' Cup. This is what really kicked off what the hell is he? Which race are you going to get out of him? And this has been a race. And by the way, the year prior, Rocket Ken won this race. White Barrio won the race prior.
Yeah.
So Tiz the Law won it. That was 2020.
Yeah.
Audible. I'm kind of looking through, like, it's not been the most productive race for winners, the Holy Bull.
No, it's just hit and miss on the timing of what the big guys want to do with their horses. The Holy Bull, I never take it all that serious because we know there's one big prep coming up, whether you're going to do the Florida Derby or go somewhere else after it. So There's not a whole lot you could say about it. It's early. It kind of gets that, that Gulfstream circuit officially going. But yeah, it's a hit and miss play. And to think that Hades won this race last year, not exactly a glowing, a gold standard, let's say, of winners. Let's put it that way. I don't know that he's even been close to winning again.
And what is it about February? From obviously the Risen Star and is mid-February, February 15th. But man, like the Sam F. Davis, like okay, whatever, Withers, whatever. Yeah. Robert B. Lewis. I mean, maybe you like again because you have to make. I mean, I think any of those races at Santa Anita, you have to like have a little bit higher regard just because of who trains out there. But yeah, it just hasn't. It's almost like January is like with the Southwest now being in January. And the comp maybe a little bit, but like you kind of like okay, like I'll wait now until the Risen Star to really because that's obviously the first 50-point race as well.
Yeah, the Withers is always pretty bad. Like I said, the Davis is always pretty bad. The Risen Star kind of kicks off, for I think for people that aren't you and I that love Oaklawn, the Risen Star really is when it starts. Where like you get the people that maybe are just. They're horse players during the, quote unquote Triple Crown run or lead up to the Derby. That's kind of where it starts right there. The points get bigger. And now you've got a race that has been really serious over the last few years.
Yeah. Last year you had Sierra Leone, you had Catching Freedom, you had Honor Marie, all horses that ran in the Kentucky Derby. So this is to me, the Risen Star meaning is this is one of those races that you like, I feel like you said, and again, you get it, you win this race. Out of all of them so far, like this one is your 1000% in the Kentucky Derby gate.
Yeah. Yeah. And, racing can be weird. Sylvia says the Holy Bull last year was the worst. And it was so bad. That had the Travers winner, the Jim Dandy winner. We'll go down the list of all the races Fierces have won. And then the Fountain of Youth, if you remember, that's when everybody scratched out of it. There was like 3 horses and Dornoch. It was awful, awful, awful. One of the worst runnings of Fountain of Youth ever. And then Dornoch went on to win, the Belmont and the Haskell. So racing can be very strange in that regard. You look back at those races, you go, boy, those were really bad. But horses did win out of them, which is, it's tough.
So, I mean, you got to think like between, if we talked about earlier, how it's like, okay, you've got, if it was Baffert, Pletcher and Cox, and we're saying like, hey, is it over under 10.5 for Derby starters? Well, that would just have to lead you to assume that you're going to have to. The biggest races are going to come from Oaklawn, Gulfstream, Fairgrounds, and of course Santa Anita, right? As far as the early ones go, maybe throw in Keeneland with the Bluegrass because between Pletcher and Cox, you're going to always have a good one in there as well. But yeah, it definitely feels like those are the ones. And then Oaklawn, I think, as well, because again, another similar where you have all those guys are having horses. I mean, really, if any track, and we'll look at the Rebel here, like that's the one, right? Because I just mentioned, Pletcher, he'll bring horses into this race sometimes. Bob Baffert, of course, he will, and Brad Cox. So this is definitely, you talk about the melting pot race. This is definitely the one. The Rebel on February 22nd.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And oddly enough, the Rebel was one of the worst races on the trail last year because Muth was supposed to be there and didn't come. And then all of a sudden you had the Cox horse that wasn't very good as the favorite and an easy winner of the race. So it is strange how it works out. A lot of it, and this is why it's hard to really predict Oaklawn, Fairgrounds, all that stuff, because a lot of it comes down to timing, like how the Cox, the Asmussen, the Bafferts, even the Pletchers, like you said, like where do they fit from a timing standpoint? It's not even really, hey, we're working backwards from the Rebel. We're working backwards for another race. The Rebel could fit what we're trying to do. So some years it's going to be good, and some years it's going to look weird, and that's really the reason why.
This is going to be an interesting race this year, the Rebel, because, historically it's been a Bob Baffert kind of playground, but it hasn't been so that much lately, right? We haven't had, Bob Baffert hasn't won this since 2021. That was with Concert Tour, which, I mean, okay.
Was going to be the favorite in the Derby until he ran like third in the Arkansas Derby.
Yeah, and then it was just gone. You know,
Yep.
the year before that, Nadal. I don't know if you remember that horse.
Yeah, he was very good, but that was the last or second to last time we saw him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
And so really past that, you know, Omaha Beach won it, Long Range Toddy, Magnum Moon, you know, Cupid was good, American Pharoah, of course, Opportunity. Those are some of the horses that have won for Bob Baffert. But yeah, you're right. Muth would have been the headliner. Timberlake stole points in that race for sure. But again, like you look at that race, and last year was kind of not a great one to use, but you did have, you know, Timberlake, which was Brad Cox. So he's going to have one, you know, I think McPeak McPeak had a couple common defense. So you're always going to get McPeak, a little McPeak flavor in the Rebel as well. So this is a race. And I think Bob Baffert is going to bring in, especially with the purse, man. Bob Baffert's going to bring in, I don't know who, right? We have no idea who. A horse may not even have a start yet, but he's going to bring in a doozy of a horse.
Absolutely. There's no question. And that's again, it's a really good spot. Yeah.
Now you look into March, you got the San Felipe. Is that the one, like, for you as far as out west? The San Felipe is always it's always been one of our one of the races I know you and I love. We went out there a few years ago and got to watch it live in a great race. But is this to me, the San Felipe is like the one where it's like, okay, this is like the legit Bob Baffert horse.
Yep. Yeah. I think, you know, other than when he debuts one in February, that's a freak, you know, you do kind of see that, okay, this one's going to stand out amongst the rest of them. And, you know, you talk about the year we were out there when McKenzie won it, and how great that was. McKenzie I guess Bolt d'Oro actually ended up winning it. Yeah. Even though McKenzie crossed the wire first. So, but anyway, that was a great race. And then, of course, Justify the next day in an allowance. We're like, oh, well, that race didn't matter that we watched. But anyway, yeah, that's when it gets serious out west, no doubt.
I mean, you look at, you know, obviously last year, Bob Baffert won it with Imagination. Was on a good horse, but did run in the Preakness. You know, Practical Move, Forbidden Kingdom, Life is Good, Authentic. I mean, look at that. Bolt d'Oro that year, which again, we just talked about. Mastery. Really, really Dortmund, California Chrome. I mean, this is, like, to me, when you're talking about who is who out west, this is the race.
Yep.
You know, this is kind of where this is the race where you figure out. And a lot of times it's like, okay, he's going to bring in one for the Rebel, the February 22nd. And then a week later, he's going to have his other big star in the San Felipe.
Yep. There's no doubt. And it's more just timing of, okay, here's who's going to Santa Anita. Here's who's going to Oaklawn with him. We'll talk about Baffert.
Let's see. How about the Virginia Derby this year? What do you think of that one?
Well, I do think it's interesting that they have it. It's going to play a factor in it. I don't know particularly who will go there. Will it steal some runners is another thing. I'm not sure. That's going to be interesting to see. You know, and of course Churchill Downs did purchase Colonial Downs a couple years ago, 2-3 years ago now. And they just decided we're going to run this time of year now, and we're going to have a Virginia Derby. We'll see. You know, I wouldn't be shocked if it got a decent field. I also wouldn't be shocked if everybody was like, oh, I forgot that was happening. We'll see what happens.
What do you think will have more runners, the Tampa Bay Derby or the Virginia Derby? Kentucky Derby runners, I mean.
That's tough. I mean, the Tampa Bay Derby usually has a pretty big field, albeit not good horses. Does Virginia steal some? I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting because it's like the Tampa Bay Derby is like not, I mean, it's like Tapatry, say, for instance, went and ran there and, you know, went on to be the Kentucky Derby favorite. Obviously didn't win, but, you know, like it's a race that brings in decent horses, but with the Virginia Derby being a week later, it'll be interesting to see what kind of fields those two kind of attract. The Jeff Ruby Stakes, that's an interesting one. You know, it's kind of turning into a productive race, I guess. It used to be a joke, and I think based on the performances we're seeing from these horses that are running in that race, it's becoming a race that you've got to pay attention to.
No, absolutely. I think it gets proven with how they've been running out of it. You know that's one you gotta look at. hard to believe Cesar Gray. You forget he was in that Jeff Ruby as well, and he of course didn't win it, but then goes on to win the Preakness. So yeah, you got to take a good look at Turfway, even the race before as well. And look, it's a good circuit right now. It, you know, like the Jeff Ruby Stakes. Will the Virginia Derby hurt a race like that? Maybe, I don't know. Like those are the races that'll kind of, you said Tampa Bay and Jeff Ruby, the races that are kind of around it. It might take a horse or two from those.
Such an interesting, I'm just going through like some of the, it's like a very, like horses aren't winning the race. Like last year, like you said, Cesar Gray went on to win Preakness. And then 2 years ago, Two Fields damn near, won the Derby. And then the year before that, you had Tiz the Bomb, but of course, Rich Strike came out of that race. And so it is definitely, again, like you can't disregard those what's coming out of those, right? I mean, especially like those last 3 years are clearly the top three, like kind of what's happening as far as, because over the years, like some like a Hot Brown, Blended Citizen, and you're like, oh, okay, whatever. Animal Kingdom is the one outlier out of like in the past years where it's like, okay, that's a good, they won over there, but now it's like legit. But these last 3 years, it's proven that this has become something.
Yeah, you can't toss them anymore. They used to be auto tosses, but now it's, you got to look at it. And it is odd that the horses that are making the biggest impacts sometimes don't win or even really threaten to win. Like Rich Strike and Cesar Gray, you watch those races, you never thought they were winning the Jeff Ruby Stakes, but then they went on to have better, success than the winners of the races. So it's weird.
All right, so the races on the screen here, this is like obviously where you this is the make or break races: Louisiana Derby, Arkansas Derby, Florida Derby, Bluegrass, Santa Anita Derby, and I'll scroll down here, but with the Wood Memorial. I mean, these are it, right? And it's an impossible question, but which of these do you think have the most kind of like, especially this year, like where you're really thinking these are the races that are going to produce the most?
Well, I mean, historically, you look back, 50 years, the Florida Derby, Bluegrass, Santa Anita Derby, that's the main three, right? But I think with the recency of what Louisiana has done lately, they feel like they're going to be right up there with those races. And then you look at the last 25 years, the Arkansas Derby certainly is a huge, huge factor in it as well. Impossible question. I always kind of feel like the Florida Derby is the one that is going to produce the best. But I think this year, with the fact that Bob Baffert's back, Santa Anita Derby might be the answer.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because that purse with the Arkansas Derby, man, is good. I wouldn't be surprised if, and again, it's all timing, right? Because you never know with where they've, March 29th, a week before the Santa Anita Derby. But like, I don't know. I almost think this year you're going to see Bob Baffert bring, and it's not like it's been, I mean, he brought Pharaoh. He's brought his best here before, don't get me wrong. But I think this year you might see his best horse come out to Arkansas.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. I mean, it'll be interesting to see, again, from a timing perspective, what lines up right for the Arkansas Derby. They moved it back so they wouldn't be that last one of the prep season, the last big one at least. So I feel like the Arkansas Derby's been pretty good the last couple of years. We'll see if they can keep that up.
This has been, you talk about the Louisiana Derby, and it's as far as production level, it's right up there, man. I don't know if you can, go against, say, like the Arkansas Derby and the Santa Anita Derby for terms of like winners. But man, you talk about just quality production. The Louisiana Derby is producing year after year of horses that are legit contenders. Epicenter, of course, did win this race. Kings Barnes, he obviously set, it's just the most insane fractions ever, but was a big horse going in, catching Freedom. Honor Marie last year was a really good one as far as production level. So it's just one of those that, Hot Rod Charlie the year prior, back in 2021, it's just been a race, man, that you have to, like I said, like we talked about Brad Cox getting horses there. Brad Cox, Todd Pletcher with Kings Barnes, Asmussen even with Epicenter. This is a race that is producing legit contenders to the Derby.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And the Louisiana circuit always kind of used, maybe not an auto toss, but until about, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, it was kind of like, yeah, they're not going to match up, but they do now. And I think it speaks to the strength of Cox and Asmussen, right? I mean, when they've got good horses, this is going to be a good circuit. And when they don't, it's going to be iffy. And I think that's how I still look at it, this year. So, and like we said at the top of the show, Cox seems to have a bunch. So how they look, what happens with them is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, you talk about the Florida Derby a little bit. The last 2 years now, it's produced the Derby favorite. Now, Forte scratched the morning of. Fierceness obviously did not win, but it has produced. And again, there's Todd Pletcher. Known Agenda was 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, I should say. So obviously, this is a race that we talk about. Bob Baffert with West. What we know, like very, very likely he'll have the favorite of Santana Derby. I would say decently likely he'll have the favorite of the Arkansas Derby. I would say very likely as well that Todd Pletcher will have the favorite of the Florida Derby. Who that is, that remains a big question.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Bill Mott's got a couple that I like. That's always a wonder of, will he go to Gulfstream? Will he go up for the Wood Memorial? That'll be interesting to see how that plays out as well.
Go through, like, it's been, and again, it's been horses too. There's some that have come that have, snuck up there, like a Maxim Security. It was a kind of, it's a whole other subject, right? But,
Right.
Look at Audible, Always Dreaming, Nyquist for Doug O'Neill.
Yep.
Orb for Shug came out of this race. So it's definitely not just Pletcher, but over the last several years, it tends to be that way.
Well, and we haven't even mentioned the race that we'll probably go to, and we've been to the last few years, the Bluegrass, and how loaded it was last year. Sierra Leone, Seize the Gray, and Dornoch. And so you were a half, a nose, really, or I guess maybe a neck, maybe a nose. I think it was a nose, actually, from having a sweep of the Triple Crown, because Sierra Leone barely lost, and then the Derby, and then Seize the Gray and Dornoch win the Preakness and the Belmont.
How about that? That's insane.
It's insane. And think of this. And I said how weird horse racing is. So Sierra Leone wins, and it was impressive, but it wasn't like crazy good, but it was good. It was good. The other two horses, you needed binoculars to find them. Mm-hmm. They were Seize the Gray never picked up his feet, and Dornoch never picked up his feet.
We certainly didn't leave that day saying, well, Sierra Leone was great. That was, it was a good performance, but man, Dornoch, like, watch out for him moving forward. Or Seize the Gray, absolutely. Like, didn't even talk. I don't think we ever mentioned those horses after that race.
Yeah, no, we didn't. We kind of thought, well, Seize the Gray, that was funny. They tried it, but he's not that type. Yeah. And then I remember talking about Seize the Gray because it was the Lucas hole. We're wheeling him back and trying the big one. And then with Dornoch, it was just like, well, I don't think he's that good. And then he goes and wins the Belmont and Haskell after looking bad in the Derby again.
You talk about as far as recent history, let me just read through a few of these over the last, let's say since 2018. Good Magic, would have won had it not been for that freak.
Yep.
Justify. Vacoma and Art Collector. Okay. Yeah. But then let's look at the last 4 years. Essential Quality, Zandon, Tapit Trice, and Sierra Leone.
Yep.
Now, none of them won the Derby, so there's that, right? But they all ran. They were all like Essential Quality. They were all top 4 or 5 choices in the Derby, right? Mm-hmm. Legit contenders. Chad Brown obviously is doing everything he can to win himself. Finally wins the Classic, doing everything he can to win the Derby. He's got horses that are there. Just not. But and again, who are the trainers of those horses? Brad Cox, Todd Pletcher, and Chad Brown.
Well, and two of the big things that we're getting, and we're knowing now, Chad Brown's best horse is going to run in the Bluegrass, right? We know that. And usually, unless timing is weird, Brad Cox wants one of his best ones there as well. So even though, look like Essential Quality, he worked backwards from the bluegrass, and Chad Brown with Zandon and with Sierra Leone worked backwards from the bluegrass. So that's you're gonna know who Brown thinks his best Derby hopeful is, because they'll be in the bluegrass.
Right. And in the same regard, you might say, well, wow, like Pletcher, he had Tabit Triso in 2023 in that race. Well, that's because he had a horse named Forte in the Florida Derby, which going in obviously was his top horse. Tabit Trice was his other one. So in the same way you have Chad Brown, Todd Pletcher's best is in the Florida Derby.
Exactly. Yeah. Todd Pletcher's best will always be in the Florida Derby. Yes, absolutely. Again, the only thing that might change it is if the timing gets thrown off, or, or little injuries or something like that. But with their big horses, the original plan is always going to be to work backwards from that race.
And Ron, you're right. Half those horses you named ran decent in the juvenile. And that's a trend, right? That if you guys pay attention to the juvenile trend that I post for the Breeders' Cup every year, it's so automatic that it's just and I don't have it in front of me. I think it was like 8 of the last 9 or something like that. Horses that won the juvenile have been in the Kentucky Derby. Mm-hmm. And it's just, again, it's all about, so even though, they may not have won the Derby, maybe they may not have been the favorite of the Derby, but they get to the Kentucky Derby. And it's been, so again, I mean, and with this year being Bob Baffert, having, being able to run the Derby, it's hard to say that they won't do it. It won't happen again this year, right? It's health wise. The one horse that was off that was Corniche, and who was that trained by? That was trained by Bob Baffert. So you never know health wise if they can get him there. But it's just been a trend that if you win the juvenile, you tend to have horses or have that horse run, get to the Kentucky Derby. So,
well, in the Corniche, that one we knew going in that was a terrible juvenile. So I don't even hardly count that one, because logically you looked at it and you went, well, these horses aren't any good, so whatever, including Corniche. He wasn't that good either. He took advantage of a weak race that time.
All right, so this is the leaderboard that's not updated. Again, this is on the Kentucky Derby website, so well done from the Kentucky Derby. But
solid.
Again, Gaming is your leader. He's not, though. Citizen Bull is the leader because he got 30 points in the juvenile, so he's going to be the leader at 40 points. Gaming would be right there in second. Chancellor McPatrick, East Avenue. I mean, those going in. This is a typical, pretty close as far as after that, though, because not a lot of points have been gotten since. But anyone that's on this list that is well off the list that you have any interest in?
Well, I think Baffert's got a nice situation set up now with Gaming and with Citizen Bull, where they don't really have to be real aggressive about points. You can kind of know they're going to run twice, get them to the Derby, and they'll be good to go. You kind of be in a good order. So that's kind of nice. The horse that isn't on the list is Admiral Dennis. I really like him. He's a Brad Cox trainee. On debut, was just a horrific ride. I mean, an absolutely horrific ride, and got third and really should have won the race. And then last time out, got a new jockey and kept him wide, and he ran and was really running well and won, and was running better and better as they got to the wire. So Admiral Dennis is one that's not on the list because he's only ran in maidens that I think could be pretty good. After that, you kind of got to just wait and see what happens. That Sovereignty that they got there that won, I believe that was the Street Sense at Churchill. Yeah. I really like him as a developing horse, a horse that's getting better and better. So those are the two now for me.
Kevin, you're right. It's funny. It's like, can you imagine going checking the NFL site and you're like, well, the Chiefs are 7-0 on year, but I think they won a couple games since.
Yeah,
it's insane. It's not like this is a random site. This is the Kentucky Derby website.
Yeah,
and we don't have it updated after the biggest race for 2-year-olds of the year. That happens to be the biggest point race of the year.
But I don't even want to get into it.
Who finished third? Bob Baffert almost finished third. Who got third? Was it no?
Oh, that Road Hill horse that I can't think of his name now. He was from
Hill Road?
overseas. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and so
And then
Getaway Car.
Getaway Car was fourth. Yeah.
So those horses are going to be top 4 really,
Mm-hmm.
that aren't obviously listed. And then East Avenue, Chance Rink, Patrick are going to be those next ones. So yeah, you're right though, because a lot of times, a lot of years, it's like Bob Baffert's like, oh well, this horse has 0 points and it's heading to the Stancini Derby, like they've got to win, Whereas now it's like, well, Citizen Bull is all but in, with 40 points. Right now. So really, if he just needs to run once. And so they'll be very, very, particular and deliberate of where they run these horses. At least those top 2 horses, which gives him a lot of freedom to run these kind of like, whether it be a maiden or fresh off a maiden and right straight into the Rebel or whatever, because you can be more aggressive in those regards, because you don't need to run Citizen Bull and Gaming in those spots because you got a lot of points already with them.
Yep. Correct. And so I think, and we know every year, it seems like almost every week between now and February, or even through February, Baffert's debuting something that's really good. And so we kind of know that, okay, this is who the best Bafferts are now, but that very well could not be the case in a matter of 3-4 weeks.
Yeah, for sure. I would venture to guess that we have. I mean, that's the thing. Like we know we haven't seen Pletcher's best horse because we don't even know who that is right at this point. Right. I would venture to say the same with Bob Baffert, and then Chad Brown. I mean, they're like it's just way too early with some of these guys. Who's the? I'll do this, and then we can kind of start wrapping it up here. But like, we've talked about Chad. Maybe you mentioned a little bit with Bill Mott, but we talked about Chad. We talked about Pletcher. We talked about Baffert. Like, they're gonna have 10 horses in the race or whatever. But who's a trainer? Like, who's like that up and coming trainer that you're like, this is the year that he could have a shot. Who feels like they're on the cusp?
Yeah, it's what a question. I think Cherie DeVoe, I know she doesn't really have like a lot of dirt horses, but she seems like an up and comer that could certainly make an impact. I always think of Cherie DeVoe. Yeah, Philip Bauer, that could be one. He's done a very good job this year. I don't know that he's got the quality horses. I don't know he's got enough quality horses to get one there, but those are kind of 2 that kind of come to my mind right off the bat. And then I think we have to take Kenny McPeak serious, now after what he did last year. So I'd have to put his name on that list as well. But I will tell you this, one of the things that you got to remember, any trainer can win this race. I would not get wrapped up in who's training some of these, because if Chip Woolley can win the Kentucky Derby, Rodney can win the Kentucky Derby. Seriously. So I do think make sure you are following the horse more than the trainer, because I think if we would have sat here this time last year and I would have told you McPeak is going to win the Oaks and the Derby, you would have said, I'll book your bet at 10,000 to 1.
Easy.
So
in fact, I was so it didn't matter who. I mean, obviously it's a terrible take now considering she's horse of the year. But after he won with Mystic Dan, you're like, well, there's no way he's winning the Oaks. Absolutely no chance. He's not sweeping these 2 races. You know what I mean?
Right.
And he obviously he did. So you could also say there's no way he can do it again. There's no way he can do it. Absolutely no chance. It's not happening. But again, I just used that logic and it didn't work well. So yeah, I do. He certainly, maybe Ron, you're right. Maybe maybe is this the year Steve Asmussen finally gets the job done, or maybe this is the year that hey, you weren't on last week to talk about it. Maybe this is the year Japan does it.
Oh God, I'm not listening to that shit again. I will say,
right, Trotty?
I will say, if it is the year for Steve Asmussen, who is it going to be? He doesn't have anything, and I'm a huge follower of his. I don't see anything that has been close to that. So,
Yeah, it doesn't. You don't. Was Nash? That was him, right?
No, that was Cox.
Oh yeah. Who was his? Who was like the most recent one that was like?
Well, Epicenter would be the most.
Yeah, I guess he was the one. Like, he had hype. I'm just trying to think of horses like he had like, January that you were super hyped about.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we can go there with Japan, Shoddy. So
No.
Yeah, I don't know. Track Phantom. I never was that super high on him though.
No. Gunrunner, I was high on. Yeah. Track Phantom, no, not so much.
Yeah.
Hall of Fame was a horse they told me was going to be pretty good.
Yeah. Who was the one that I had 2 years ago in the fantasy league? That he ran on. Remember, he ran Churchill Kentucky Derby, the first race of the Kentucky Derby day.
Oh, God, that overrated horse.
Yes.
Who the hell?
He came in with a ton of hype.
Yeah,
ton of hype.
Starts
got
with
hurt,
E, doesn't it? I can't remember his name now. Extra Neho.
Yeah,
Kevin.
Yeah. There you go. Extra Neho.
Yeah.
Big time hype. Early.
Mm-hmm.
But and Kevin, no, I'm not. We're not. I have not. Like, I do have a list of fillies I'd like to run by you, but we'll address that later. We can't talk about it right now. So.
Right.
In front of everybody, because I do think maybe this is the year the filly wins the Derby.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a filly could have made an impact last year in Torpedo Anna. You drafted the wrong filly. Although I will say, I do think you deserve credit. The filly you drafted made the Kentucky Oaks, so it's not like she was bad.
I know, right? And I want to also say, and I've not gone through and look. We have what did we have? 11 or 12 teams, and I'm pretty sure my first round pick earned more points than almost half of the first round teams. So
easily. Yeah.
I mean, was it a bad pick? Absolutely. Am I still embarrassed about it? Yes, but it wasn't the worst pick in the first round. That needs to be stated.
Yeah. No, it wasn't. And I don't think it was particularly close. Like you said, I think you beat half of the first round picks. So
I know I tend to have very good, good energy with the fillies, but the men. I mean, that's probably a good sign, though. Honestly.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Any final thoughts? Obviously, it's not really final thoughts because we have like 6 months to talk about the Kentucky Derby.
Right.
But any final thoughts as it relates to the first look of the Derby?
Yeah, not really. I am excited to kind of keep an eye on the maiden special weights for the next couple of months. I think that's always kind of fun to see. Okay, we know kind of the established bunch now. Who's the up and comer that's going to come up and be like, whoa, that blows us away, and half of them will be terrible in their next start and half of them will progress, right? So that's kind of the fun part of it, watching these maiden special weights. And look, it's kind of a weird time of year where we're kind of in that holding pattern, but the Derby is coming up, and a maiden special weight can produce a Derby horse at any time. So that's why I'm going to keep my eyes on the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Gun to your head, has the Derby winner ran yet?
Yeah, probably so. I think so. I think the crop is fairly strong right now. So I think I would lean towards yes, that it has started. The Derby winner has started already.
Manlow, we talked about that a little bit ago or earlier in the show. I'll kind of refresh you though. I set the number at 3.5 for Derby starters for Bob Baffert. Halterman did go under. Mm-hmm. We also talked about the combo of Baffert, Cox, and Pletcher at 10.5, which is a big number, right? But we talked a lot about those runners as well. So two numbers there for you to kind of think about.
I went under just to go back to it. I went under because I think if the race was in January, he might have 10, but by the time May gets here, will he have 3 horses healthy? Right. So he's going to have to prove to me he can keep horses healthy, because that certainly has not been something he's been able to do the last however many years. Right.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And how aggressive he's going to be is going to be interesting with regards of he's not had to be aggressive because he knew he couldn't get, horses, and he's pointing horses to the Preakness or whatever. And now it's like, okay, all hands are going to be, and I don't know. He'll never say it obviously, but there's no chance that he's not thinking, like, I want a big FU to Churchill Downs. I want to get as many runners in as I can. I want to win that race for the next 5 years or whatever it is. Like, because, and he'll never say that. But there's no way he's not thinking that.
Well, I'll tell you one damn thing that I am very confident in when it comes to that guy. If he's got the right horse and that horse stays healthy, he will win it.
Absolutely.
If he's got the horse good enough, they'll win it. Because, and I don't know what you can speculate, whatever, about how or why or what he does. But as a gambler, there's no better feeling than when Bob Baffert has a good horse, because you can count on him to show up. And that's all that as a gambler, that's all I really care about. And if one of these horses is good enough, they'll win the race. I promise you.
I mean, there's no guy that's training right now that knows how to win that race better than that guy for sure. So,
yep.
All right, guys, that's all the time we have. Make sure you check us out at racingdudes.com for our free picks and our premium selections on the products page. Click the Get Racy Dudes premium button at the menu at racingdudes.com to learn more. The Rockets have been firing a ton lately. If you haven't seen the website, we've kind of updated the way it looks in terms of what we're posting. There's a lot more of like, here's the hits that we've hit lately, whether it be Rockets, whether it be premium, and you can get an idea before you purchase one of those premium packages. We'll have some deals coming up as well between Thanksgiving and Black Friday stuff. And we always do like a cyber week as far as deals. So make sure you stay looking out for that in the coming weeks. We're on Twitter at Racing_Dudes. Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. You can find episodes of Blinkers Off by visiting our podcast page, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Just go over to YouTube, search Racing Dudes, find that, and go hit that like and notification and subscribe. Dudes Who Bet Sports. Did you guys have a show? I didn't even notice if you guys didn't.
Yeah, we did a show this morning, and we went over everything going on in football right now. And to put it on a subject you probably want to talk about, big game in Buffalo this weekend for the Chiefs as they try to stay undefeated. And the Chiefs are an underdog for the first time all year. They are a 2-point underdog.
Well, regardless, they weren't covering anyways. So, I mean, that's good as far as they were favorites because they never cover. The Chiefs are, I mean, what more can you say? They continue to find ways to win games. That game on Sunday was absolutely insane. I'd written that one off. I was like, well, there's our loss. We lost to the Broncos at home. And then we blocked the kick. And I mean, I think the Bills are the Bills a better team than the Chiefs? Yeah. Like talent, like Josh Allen is playing better. Yeah. I mean, but it's the Chiefs. We own them in the playoffs, not necessarily in the regular season. So we'll see. I think it's going to be a tough game, but the Chiefs are like that, whether they play the Broncos, which I do think the Broncos are the best team in the division other than the Chiefs. Bo Nix has kind of surprised me of how well he's playing. Dude, the Raiders suck, and so do the Chargers. So
I think the Chargers are better than Denver for sure.
I don't think so. But it's close, I guess. But I think Bo Nix is playing well. But regardless, like whether they're playing the Raiders, we can agree that they suck.
Yeah.
Or they're playing the Bills. The game feels like it'll be the same, right? It's close. It'll be close. The Chiefs will fuck around. I have no idea. Like the Chiefs should be a better team. They just they have not played super well, but again, how can you? They've won 15 in a row. So what can you say?
I think you said a line that probably defines the game for me. The Chiefs own the Bills in the playoffs. The Bills have been able to beat the Chiefs in the regular season. It's the regular season. It's going to be a bigger game for the Bills than it is for the Chiefs. I think the Bills will get them on Sunday. If the Bills could beat them 50-0, I do not think the Bills will get them in the postseason. But I think on Sunday, I think they might.
Yeah, it's going to be close. I mean that's the Chiefs. That's the way they play every game. So, it's just it's hard. It's hard to define what the Chiefs are doing. It's just championship team. They find ways to win.
Yep.
They mess around until the game. But the issue, what happened last week, and they got fortunate right by blocking a kick, is the game fell out of Mahomes' hands, right? Because he they had a chance there to score, and he overthrew Kelsey in the end zone, had to kick a field goal, got the lead, but then it became out of his hands, right? And the defense has played well, and again, but like they should have won that game. Broncos, I mean, I think they outplayed them the whole game, really.
Yeah, they did.
And so you won't be able to get away with that with the Bills. Let's put it that way.
At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. This game really to the Chiefs, it's like everybody when they play the Chiefs, we're out to prove something.
Yeah, exactly.
This game doesn't matter to the Chiefs. Like I seriously, I'll stick by it. I will come back here next week if the Chiefs lose 50-0. I will still think the Chiefs are going to beat them in the playoffs because it's the end. Again, it's going to be a wild atmosphere. Everybody in Buffalo is ready for this one. They're going to be juiced up and ready, and Buffalo may beat them. If so, oh well. I mean, it's not that big of a deal for Kansas City because they're the champs. So you got to go beat them in the playoffs. Right now, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, if you go watch like a lot of the reactions to, there's like people watching the game, and they're all the Broncos fans, and it's like you would have thought this was like the AFC Championship, right? Like this was that level of like excitement, and we're gonna do it. We're gonna beat fuck the Chiefs, like whatever.
Mhm.
So yeah, you're right. And then even though like I do think like they have a target or they have a goal, like they want to win 3 in a row, the first ever to do it, and blah blah blah. At the end of the day, it'd be impossible. I was talking to some family about this over the weekend. It's like it'd be impossible for the team like the Chiefs to not come into Arrowhead on Sunday against the Broncos and be like not super amped up for it, right? It's like because they know what that it doesn't matter. This game ultimately does not matter, and so there's no way they have that edge that some of these other teams have going in because they want to beat them, whereas they're like, whatever, okay, like we'll fuck around here and then see if we can pull it out there at the end. It's again the Chiefs season really doesn't start anyways until January. So
no, it's all about positioning. You just want to get positioning. You want to get a. You don't really want to go on the road again. So I think from here on out, the goal is to get the number 1 seed. Even if you lose 2 or 3 games, as long as you're the number 1 seed, it doesn't really matter. And that's where it's at. And I mean, they're not going undefeated. It might be better to get the loss out of the way now, because the more games they win, the more that's going to creep into their minds. So it might be better just to get that over with and then move on. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought too. I mean, I do think I think the Steelers game is going to be the next biggest test for them as far as like past Buffalo. Say if they were to win against Buffalo, Steelers are just a tough team, right? Just plain and simple. So I do think that, but again, all things go through Arrowhead. This would be a huge game for the Chiefs to win because they would obviously amp up or increase their lead to Buffalo as far as the 1 seed would go. Would be almost put a bow on it, really.
Yeah.
But a Bills win would definitely at least keep it the hope alive that they could somehow sneak in there as the 1 seed. But we'll see. Again, as a fan, I don't know if you had this feeling. It's different with college football because when years like when OU was like as good as they were, like it was more like you needed to win every game kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know if like it's like when you are like at the top, it's hard to like even as a fan, you're like, well, I mean, if they lose, it's like this doesn't mean anything for the Super Bowl, so.
Yeah. I think now with the 12-team playoff, you it's not like the NFL where you can lose a bunch and still win the Super Bowl, but you can lose a game or 2. And so that kind of lessens. Unfortunately for me, you can't lose 5 and still make it. So, or 7 as when it's all said and done. So,
yeah. Not that I did not mean to bring up any.
That's fine.
Any sad news for you? I had to go withstand it at the place, and so. I was at Mizzou because I have family that lives at Mizzou or lives in Columbia, and I didn't have anything going on last weekend, and they were like, "Hey, we're gonna tailgate and do all this stuff," and my parents are Mizzou fans, and I was like, "All right, whatever, I'll go." And so I did not wear any Mizzou gear. I want to make sure that's very clear.
Right.
I just basically was just floating around. And that was maybe the worst game I've ever watched until it wasn't.
It wasn't because of mistakes. It wasn't because
oh.
it was an exciting finish.
Like the end was exciting, but it wasn't a good game.
It wasn't good exciting even. It was like, wow, this team's so bad. Yeah.
It was like, but the first part was like, I'm surprised I even saw the second part because I wanted to kill myself during the first half. It was so bad.
And I want to ask you publicly, because I've asked you privately, ever in your life did you think you would see an Oklahoma team this bad?
No.
Could you even imagine them being this bad?
No, not. I think more than anything, because we've seen them have really bad defenses before, but just to have, like, I text you and I was like, because I was like, is this? I was like, is your quarterback hurt or who is? Like, you're like, no, this is him. I'm like, he's so bad, beyond bad. So I don't know how did the program get this bad? Is what I'd like to know.
Well, that's step one. We didn't have a coach the last 4 or 5 years, and now we don't have a coach again the last 3 years. So,
well, what's the plan? They put you in charge yet?
I don't know. It's depressing. I think the plan is keep Venables and go get an offensive coordinator. So,
I mean, Manuel seems to think Venables needs to go.
Well, he absolutely does, but I don't know.
You can't afford to buy him out. It's a problem, right?
Yeah, you're gonna have to pay him $45 million to buy him out.
Who was the genius that made that hire?
Yeah, that was the off season. That was in the off season. They did it wasn't the hire so much; it was the extension. Like they extended him, and that made the buyout go way up. Without that extension, the buyout wouldn't be that much. So, not good at all. But yeah, and this is like here's what, and I get it. Like Kevin B says, you can have James Franklin if you'd like. He's a coach at Penn State. Franklin beats everybody but Ohio State and Michigan, basically. James Franklin is 10 times better than what we have, maybe 20. We would take James Franklin and build a statue of the fucking guy versus what we have now. Because when you watch Penn State, they look like a football team. We look like a circus, and you've seen it firsthand now. You've seen what I've been watching all year. It's a circus. Like family members that like Arkansas, you like Arkansas. I would take Sam Pittman and how they look over how we look right now.
Yeah.
And I don't think Pittman's any good.
I'd like to know what your quarterback was doing on that last. I mean, truly, like, what was he looked like I was his first. He's never played before until that game.
I'm gonna
blow your mind. I thought was awful for MU.
I'm gonna blow your mind right now. That's not even in the top 3 of the worst plays he's made all year. It might be top 5, but it's definitely not in the top 3.
Wow.
Yeah.
Boy, because that was bad. That was so bad. Like, that went from that game was just like, okay, well, OU, I mean, they got it, like, because MU was so bad. So it's like, well, they got away with this. They're still going to win. Yeah. They kind of pulled it out their lane with and then it's like, how do you let that happen? And in that situation,
this is the worst part of it. They pushed out Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah, Dylan Gabriel. Yeah,
who's the quarterback of the number 1 team in the nation, and I don't think he's going to win the Heisman. He might. He's in the conversation. He's going to go to New York. I don't know if he's probably not going to win it, but for the kid you're talking about, that's why Gabriel isn't there. How can any coach?
That's a fireable. That's a fireable offense right there.
Exactly. That alone is enough. It's unbelievable,
dude. At halftime, the punter for OU had the most passing yards in that game.
I know.
I mean, and then by the way, your quarterback is so bad that at the end of the game, it made like the Mizzou quarterback look like he was, the next the next Heisman winner.
I know.
Like, that's how bad when you compared those two. And he's not. That dude might be shorter than Cohen.
He's awful. He's awful. Now, in their defense, that was their backup, right?
I know.
So at least that was their backup. This is our guy. This is our guy. This is the guy we ran Gabriel out of town for.
Yeah. Dude, by the way, just so you know, like, because my my family that was there, that lives there, like, they're like season ticket holders. I mean, they are legit Mizzou fans.
Yeah.
And they were like, I don't even want to go to this game because we are going to get killed because our quarterback is so bad.
Yep.
Beyond bad. I don't want to be here.
Think of how bad a decent team would have beat Missouri that night, because they couldn't even get a first down for most of the game.
He literally would throw it sideways or backwards the whole time.
Oh, you got short fields like 4 times in the first half and never could score.
Trust me, I know. I lived it. I was like, what? I wanted to question my life choices, with being there. But it was, I don't know. I can't really say much about it. It happened. So, okay, guys, I think that's going to wrap us up. The Magic Mike show, they did a show earlier as well. I believe they did. What did they do? Del Mar?
They did Aqueduct. They did Aqueduct.
Okay.
The question, I got to address this. Would you take Lincoln Riley back? No, that's part of the problem.
Yeah, he created the problem. He started the problem.
He started it, and now it's getting worse because of what we hired after that. So he was the first part of it.
Where's Stoops and all this?
He's retired.
I know, but he's got some sort of pull. Like, is he not like making some calls or something?
I don't know. Truthfully, I don't know the answer to that. He's still around.
Oh, I know, because whatever his name is, weird, like Drinkowitz or Coach Drink or whatever they call him.
Right.
Gave Stoops shit after the game. I guess Stoops said something. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't get in on that, but
I don't know either.
He said something about
I don't know what he was talking about.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember. It's something like, I wonder how Stoops feels about that, or and it was like, that's a weird flex, man. Like, that's a weird flex. God, I don't know. I thought that was a weird thing to say, anyways. But
it was.
Anyways, so what do you guys have this week?
We're off, thank God. But guess who we have next week? It's bad.
Who?
Alabama.
Oh shit! Yeah. Well, Arkansas is Texas, so that's not going to be much better. So.
No, that won't be good either.
No. Well, okay. Anyways. All right, guys. That's all the time we have. Check us out next time. We'll be live. Let's see. What we got next week? Big racing happening next week?
Nothing next week either. We'll have to make up another topic. I'll start thinking now.
Yeah, we can't. Maybe we'll do the Oaks one next week.
Oh, God. Okay, great.
Who was that filly that I texted you about that day that was like ran like Breeders' Cup?
Oh, yeah. Starts with an M. Weird name. Mira. It's Brad Cox. Big gray horse. Starts with an M. Ran at Churchill.
Yeah,
twice.
I think it was Godolphin, maybe even.
Yep, can't think of that name.
Solid looking horse.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
So that gives everybody a lot of insight. I know. So
yeah.
All right, guys. I'm Jared Welch. He's Aaron Alterman. We'll see you guys
Tune in next week for that.
That's right. You got to tease it a little bit. Who are we talking about? Tune in next week to find out. See you guys.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Blinkers Off. Join our horse racing community at racingdudes.com and follow us on Twitter at racing_dudes. Want to make money betting horses? Bet with the Racing Dudes.